They thought I was dead. My ex-husband even married someone else. But when I walked into that room alive, everyone froze. Those words still echo in my mind like the final note of a song I was never meant to finish. The night sky was calm when the plane took off, but my heart wasn't. I remember gripping my seatbelt tighter as thunder rolled in the distance. People laughed, chatted, clinked glasses. No one imagined that within minutes, their lives would hang by a thread. Then, without warning, the plane jolted violently. Luggage flew from the overhead bins, oxygen masks dropped, and screams filled the air. I heard a child cry for his mother as the lights flickered out. The engines roared one last time before the world turned into fire and chaos. The next thing I knew, everything went silent, a silence so heavy it felt like death itself had wrapped around me. I remember thinking, so this is it. I never even got to spend the money. My last clear thought before blacking out was about the $12 million inheritance from my late uncle, the fortune that had changed everything. Before that day, I was an ordinary woman suddenly handed unimaginable wealth. I was supposed to start a new chapter, maybe travel, maybe finally live without fear. But fate had other plans. As the metal tore apart and the sea rushed closer, I realized how fragile everything truly was. Money, love, even life itself. When I woke up, I wasn't in heaven or hell. I was lying somewhere cold, wet, and eerily quiet, the smell of smoke still in the air. My body ached, my clothes were torn, and for a moment, I didn't even know my own name. I had survived, but no one knew. Back home, they were already mourning me, crying fake tears, signing papers, and dividing my wealth. My ex-husband was already in the arms of another woman. They all thought I was gone forever. But fate wasn't done with me yet. I was supposed to die that day. Instead, I came back to life. And when I did, I learned the truth. Death doesn't change people. It only reveals who they really are. Before all this happened, I had just inherited $12 million from my late uncle, and that inheritance would become both my blessing and my curse. Before the crash, before the lies and betrayal, I was just an ordinary woman trying to make ends meet. My life wasn't glamorous. I worked long hours at a small office, paid bills late more often than on time, and lived in a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of old paint and coffee. My uncle, Richard, was the only person who ever believed I deserved more. He was my mother's older brother, a quiet, mysterious man who built an empire from nothing. He never had children, and most of the family stayed distant from him because he was too strict, too private. But I knew the truth. He was just lonely. He'd invite me over sometimes for dinner, talk about life, business, and the importance of dignity. I never imagined that one day his lessons would come with a $12 million price tag. When the lawyer called, I thought it was a mistake. "Miss, your uncle left you his entire estate, the mansion, the cars, the accounts. You're his sole heir." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I dropped the phone, my knees trembling as the words replayed in my head. $12 million. I had never even seen that many zeros in my bank app. My first emotion wasn't joy, it was disbelief. I kept expecting someone to show up and tell me it was all a cruel joke. But it was real. The lawyer handed me thick envelopes filled with documents, property deeds, and photographs of the mansion that now belonged to me. White marble floors, golden chandeliers, a garden bigger than my entire neighborhood. At first, I felt pure joy, the kind that makes your heart race and your mind spin with possibilities. I could finally rest. No more sleepless nights wondering how to pay rent, or whether I could afford groceries. I spent hours just sitting on the marble staircase, running my fingers over the cold stone, whispering, "This is mine. Uncle Richard did this for me." But soon excitement turned to fear. Because when money enters your life, people change. It started with old friends texting out of nowhere, "Hey, how have you been? We should catch up." Then distant cousins appeared, claiming to miss me after years of silence. But the biggest shock came from one person I never wanted to hear from again. My ex-husband, Daniel. He had left me 2 years earlier for another woman, breaking my heart and shattering my confidence. And now, suddenly, he wanted to talk. His messages were sugar-coated. "I've been thinking about us. Maybe we made a mistake." I wasn't naive. I could read between the lines. He had seen the news. The inheritance announcement was public. When he called me sweetheart, again I almost laughed. I could hear the greed hiding behind every word. One night, he showed up at my gate, holding flowers and smiling like the man I once loved. "You look amazing," he said, eyes scanning the mansion behind me more than my face. I didn't let him in. But that moment, that fake, polished smile, told me everything. He didn't love me. He loved what I had. As the days passed, the calls, visits, and fake kindness multiplied. Everyone suddenly cared. Everyone wanted to be part of my new life. But deep down, I knew it wasn't love or family loyalty. It was hunger, and my uncle's fortune had become the feast. What I didn't know then was that this inheritance would lead me straight into the storm, the crash, the betrayal, and the moment they'd all wish I had stayed dead. After weeks of restless nights and endless phone calls from people pretending to care, I decided I needed to escape, just for a while. The weight of my uncle's inheritance was crushing me. Every smile around me felt fake. Every congratulations tasted like poison. So when my lawyer mentioned he had some last documents to review at his branch office across the country, I booked a flight without hesitation. I told myself it would be a quick trip, a few days of peace, some time to breathe away from the noise, the greed, and the pretending. The morning of the flight was strangely gloomy, the sky thick with clouds that looked almost alive, swirling like gray smoke. I remember staring out the taxi window, feeling a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. Maybe it was anxiety, or maybe it was fate whispering a warning. At the airport, everything seemed normal. Children laughing, flight attendants smiling, the hum of engines in the distance. Yet, as I handed over my ticket and stepped onto the plane, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. The air felt heavier than usual. I took a window seat near the wing and tried to calm myself by watching raindrops slide down the glass. When the engines roared to life, I whispered a silent prayer, not for money, not for safety, but for clarity. The plane took off smoothly at first. The captain's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and steady, promising a 2-hour flight and slight turbulence due to weather. But within 20 minutes, the sky turned violent. Rain battered the windows like bullets, and lightning tore through the clouds with blinding flashes. People gasped, murmured prayers. Some reached for their seatbelts. I clenched my armrest as the plane jerked suddenly, dipping low before climbing sharply again. The overhead lights flickered. The flight attendants' calm faces began to crack into fear. Then came the sound, a loud, guttural boom from the left engine, followed by smoke trailing past my window. Someone screamed. The cabin tilted sharply, throwing drinks and luggage through the air. A child cried somewhere behind me, his voice drowned by the roaring wind and the blaring alarms. I looked out the window and saw fire licking at the wing, sparks scattering into the storm. Panic erupted. People shouted names, begged for help, clutched strangers' hands as the plane began to spin. My mind froze. I couldn't think, couldn't scream. I could only stare at the chaos unfolding in slow motion. The pilot's voice tried to cut through the panic. Brace. Brace for impact. But it was too late. The plane plunged downward, nose first, shaking violently. My seatbelt dug into my chest. Everything around me blurred into flashes of light and color. I remember the smell of smoke, the sting of tears, the sound of metal tearing apart like paper. And then silence. For a split second, everything stopped. Time stood still. I thought of my uncle's mansion, the empty halls echoing with greed. I thought of Daniel's fake smile. I thought of how foolish I'd been to believe money could buy peace. And as the world around me shattered into fire and darkness, I whispered to myself, in this moment, money means nothing. Only miracles can save me now. The last thing I saw was the ocean rushing up to meet us, fast and merciless, before everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I thought I was dreaming, or maybe I had already crossed into some half-forgotten place between life and death. The first thing I felt was pain, a deep, pulsing ache that stretched from my shoulder to my ribs. My head was pounding, my mouth dry, and every breath burned like fire. I tried to move, but my body screamed in protest. The air smelled like salt and smoke. As my vision cleared, I realized I was lying on a stretch of rocky shore, the remnants of the plains scattered around me like broken wings. Pieces of metal glinted in the weak sunlight, floating in the shallow water. The waves crashed softly, almost mournfully, as if the sea itself was grieving. I was alive. Somehow, against every law of nature, I had survived. My seatbelt must have held me in place long enough before the fuselage broke apart. Around me, there were no voices, no cries for help. Just silence, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel small. I called out, hoarse and trembling, but there was no answer. Only the wind, carrying away my voice as if mocking me. I crawled toward a piece of driftwood and tried to stand, my knees shaking beneath me. My clothes were torn, soaked with blood and seawater, and one of my shoes was missing. I could feel the sting of small cuts all over my legs. My reflection in a puddle was barely recognizable, hair matted, face bruised, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're stronger than you think," I heard a voice whisper in my mind. My uncle's voice, calm and steady, from one of the last conversations we'd had. He told me that when everything falls apart, strength isn't found in muscles or money, but in willpower. Survival, he used to say, isn't about being unbreakable. It's about choosing to keep going even when you are. Those words became my anchor in that moment. For the first few hours, I stumbled across the shore, searching for anyone else, but all I found were fragments, a burned shoe, a floating suitcase, the torn wing of the plane. As the sun began to set, reality hit me. I was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone. My body was weak, but my instincts kicked in. I found a small inlet of rocks that offered some shelter from the wind and gathered what little debris I could find, bits of seat cushions, plastic covers, to build a makeshift shelter. The night was merciless, cold, wet, and echoing with strange sounds. Every crack of branches or hiss of wind made me jump. I pressed my knees to my chest and tried not to cry. I thought of home, of how everyone must believe I was gone. I imagined Daniel crying fake tears, holding some woman's hand at my funeral, pretending to mourn me while already spending the money I'd left behind. The thought burned more than the salt on my wounds. Days blurred into each other. I had no food except for a few scraps washed ashore, a half-empty water bottle, a small pack of crackers that had somehow stayed dry. I rationed them carefully, forcing myself to eat tiny bites. I drank rainwater when I could and tried to keep moving, hoping I'd find something, a road, a village, a sign of life. My body grew thinner, my strength faded, but I refused to give up. Every time I thought I'd collapse, I'd hear my uncle's voice again. "You've survived worse storms, child. Keep walking." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had inherited millions, yet here I was, trading jewelry and wealth in my mind for just one more day of survival. On the fourth day, I saw something, a dark shape on the horizon. At first, I thought it was a hallucination. My vision was blurry, my lips cracked, and my legs barely obeyed me. But as it drew closer, I realized it was a small fishing boat. I waved my arms desperately, shouting until my throat bled. The men on board spotted me and turned the boat around. The moment they pulled me aboard, I broke down completely. The fishermen looked at me with wide eyes, half in shock, half in pity. "You're from the crash," one of them asked in disbelief. I could only nod before my body gave out and everything faded again into darkness. When I woke up the second time, I was in a hospital bed, hooked to IVs, covered in bandages, surrounded by the rhythmic beeping of machines. A nurse smiled softly. "You're a miracle," she said. "They said no one survived." My hands trembled as I asked how long I'd been missing. 8 days, she replied. "They already held your funeral." I felt my heart stop. A funeral. My own funeral. Somewhere out there, people had cried over my death. But I knew not all those tears were real. My lawyer had likely declared me dead, and my inheritance, every penny, every property, had already been transferred. Daniel must have been celebrating, believing he had finally won. Little did he know, the woman he buried wasn't gone. She was coming back. Not just to reclaim her fortune, but to expose every lie buried with her name. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, my body was healing, but my soul felt hollow. I had survived the impossible, yet the world I was returning to no longer belonged to me. The doctors begged me to rest, to take time before facing the outside world, but I couldn't. I needed to know what had happened while I was gone, who had mourned me, who had moved on, and who had taken what wasn't theirs. With the little strength I had, I asked the hospital staff not to release any information about my survival. I wanted to re-enter my life like a ghost, quietly unseen. A local fisherman lent me a phone, and my hands trembled as I searched my name online. The first headline nearly stopped my heart. "Heiress presumed dead after plane crash. Estate transfer to spouse." I blinked at the screen, rereading those words over and over until they blurred. Spouse. But Daniel wasn't my spouse anymore. We had divorced years ago. How could this be possible? My lawyer, the same man who'd once handled my uncle's will, must have filed false documents. My name, my fortune, my entire identity, handed over to the man who had betrayed me long before fate did. When I reached the city, no one recognized me at first. My hair was shorter now, uneven from the rescue. My skin was pale, scarred. I looked like a stranger walking through my own life. I took a cab to the mansion, my mansion, and as it came into view, my stomach turned. There were new cars parked out front, a fountain installed near the driveway, and the once quiet garden was filled with decorations for what looked like a party. My heart raced. I slipped past the gates, hiding behind the hedges, watching through the glow of the lights. And there he was, Daniel, my ex-husband, laughing, glass in hand, his arm wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize. She was wearing one of my dresses. Not just any dress, the silk one my uncle had given me on my last birthday before he died. I froze. Around them, guests mingled, toasting to something I couldn't yet comprehend. Then I heard it, Daniel's voice, smooth and triumphant. "To new beginnings," he said. "To the life she wanted for us." The crowd laughed and clinked glasses. I wanted to scream, to burst through the door and tell them I was alive, but something inside me whispered to wait. I stood in the dark, unseen, and listened. My best friend, Sarah, was there too, the same woman who used to cry with me after the divorce, the one who said she'd always be by my side. She leaned in close to Daniel's new wife, saying, "It's strange, isn't it? How fate works. Poor thing didn't even get to enjoy her millions." They both laughed. My blood ran cold. Every smile, every embrace, every word, it was all built on my grave. Over the next few days, I stayed in a cheap motel, gathering information quietly. I visited my old lawyer's office, pretending to be someone else, and overheard enough to piece together the truth. After the crash, when I was declared dead, Daniel had shown up with forged documents claiming we had remarried in private before the accident. He presented a will, fake, of course, naming him as my sole beneficiary. No one questioned it. Not one person. My lawyer, the man who was supposed to protect my uncle's legacy, had helped him. In exchange, Daniel had promised him a share. Within weeks, everything was signed over. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, all gone. At first, I felt numb. Betrayal was something I thought I had already experienced, but this was deeper, colder. It wasn't just about money. It was about erasure. They had taken my life and rewritten it as their victory. I thought about the funeral, how Daniel must have stood by my coffin, pretending to grieve while already planning how to spend my inheritance. The woman in my dress probably comforted him, whispering empty condolences. It made me sick. My heartbreak began to morph into something sharper, heavier anger. Real, blinding anger. I realized that I wasn't mourning anymore. I was awakening. I was alive, I whispered to myself one night, staring at the ceiling of my motel room. But to them I was worth more dead. That truth burned in me like wildfire. The world had buried me once, but this time I was coming back, and I wouldn't be the one lying in the coffin. I would make them see the woman they tried to erase, and I would make them pay for every tear, every lie, every dollar they stole from the life I nearly died to protect. The day I decided to confront them, the city felt unnaturally calm, as if even the wind was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to happen. I had spent days preparing, collecting every document I could from the hospital, the rescue team, and even the Coast Guard survival report. Every signature, every timestamp proved one simple fact. I was alive when they declared me dead. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted truth. I wanted to see their faces when the ghosts they buried walked back into the room. I found out that Daniel and his new wife, Melissa, were hosting a small family celebration at the mansion that evening, apparently to mark the 1-year anniversary of moving forward. Moving forward from me. My stomach churned at the thought. I dressed simply, black jeans, a coat, and the same necklace my uncle had given me years ago. It was tarnished but real. Unlike them. As I approached the gates of what was once my home, my heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. The guards at the entrance looked at me strangely. "Miss, you can't just—" one began, but I met his eyes and said quietly, "Tell your employer that the woman he buried has returned." Something in my tone made him hesitate. Within seconds, the gate opened. Inside, laughter and music spilled through the open doors. Candles glowed across long tables, wine glasses shimmered, and Daniel stood at the center, arm around Melissa, playing the role of a perfect husband. When I stepped through the doorway, everything stopped. The music, the chatter, all of it vanished into stunned silence. Dozens of faces turned toward me, pale and wide-eyed, as if they'd seen a ghost. Melissa dropped her glass. It shattered against the floor. "Oh, my God!" she gasped, her voice trembling. She's dead." Daniel froze, his smile faltering, color draining from his face. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then I spoke, my voice calm, almost too calm. "No, Melissa. I'm very much alive, but it looks like you two have been enjoying my death quite comfortably." Daniel stammered, stepping forward as if rehearsing his reaction. I can't believe it. We thought you were gone. Everyone did. We had a funeral, for God's sake." I tilted my head, eyes narrowing. "A funeral you arranged, using my money, after forging my signature and claiming we were married again. You mourned me with fake tears while signing documents behind my back." The crowd began whispering, glancing between us. Melissa grabbed Daniel's arm, her face pale as paper. "She can't prove anything," she hissed, but I heard it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope, slamming it on the table. Hospital records, rescue reports, legal timestamps, proof that I was alive when you claimed otherwise. And before you start denying it, maybe check the signatures on those marriage papers. Your handwriting always slanted to the left when you were nervous. Daniel's mask cracked. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The lawyer, who had helped him, was also there, His face turned ashen when he saw me. "You," I said sharply, pointing at him. "You swore an oath to protect my uncle's estate, and instead you sold it to the highest bidder. You betrayed the very man who trusted you." The room was dead silent. Melissa began to cry, but it sounded forced, almost rehearsed. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen," she sobbed. "We thought it was what you would have wanted." I laughed, not the kind of laugh that comes from amusement, but one that burns from the inside. "What I would have wanted? You took everything from me. My name, my house, my life. And for what? To sip wine in stolen luxury." Daniel tried to step closer, his voice softening into false sympathy. "Listen, we can fix this. We'll make it right." I stepped back, raising a hand. "No, you can't fix death. You made sure of that when you buried me for your own greed." My voice grew colder, stronger with each word. "You told people I was gone, Daniel. You comforted my friends, took my inheritance, and kissed her while my ashes, or whatever you burned, were still warm. You didn't lose me. You sold me." Gasps filled the room. The lawyer tried to speak, but I cut him off. "Don't bother explaining. You'll have your chance in court." I looked at every face in that room, the same people who'd toasted to my memory a year ago. You all stood there and watched them rob a dead woman. But now you get to see what happens when the dead don't stay buried. Without another word, I turned toward the door, leaving behind the mansion that had once symbolized my new beginning but had become a monument to their deceit. Behind me, I heard Daniel shouting, Melissa crying, the lawyer muttering about damage control. None of it mattered. For the first time since the crash, I felt free, not just from the wreckage of that plane, but from the wreckage of my past. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for justice. But standing there, hearing their lies unravel, I realized something deeper. Justice wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the emptiness they had left me with, to know what it was like to be alive, yet treated as if you were already gone. The court battle that followed was as brutal as any storm I'd ever faced, but this time, I wasn't the one fighting to survive. I was fighting to reclaim my life. Every headline screamed my story. Woman returns from the dead to expose greedy ex-husband. Cameras followed me into the courthouse, but I kept my head high. Daniel and Melissa sat across the aisle, their faces pale, their lawyers whispering frantically. The once smooth liar who buried me for money now looked small, cornered, desperate. The judge examined the evidence, my medical records, the rescue team's reports, the forged documents. With every piece presented, their lies unraveled like cheap thread. The room was silent when the verdict came. All assets and funds were to be restored to their rightful owner, me. Daniel's face crumpled in disbelief. Melissa turned away, tears streaking her makeup, though I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or fear of losing her luxury life. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, because this wasn't victory. It was closure. In the days that followed, I walked through the mansion one last time before selling it. The walls still echoed with laughter that had never been real, promises that had never been meant. I realized I didn't need its chandeliers or marble floors. What I needed was freedom, peace. I sold most of the estate, keeping only a few items that truly mattered. My uncle's watch, his letters, and a framed photo from the day he told me, "Money can build walls or bridges, you choose which." That sentence had guided me through every dark moment. So I chose bridges. With the money reclaimed, I started using it the way my uncle would have wanted. I donated a large portion to the rescue foundation that had found me. I funded scholarships for orphans of disaster victims and built a small medical outpost near the coastline where I was rescued, a place where help could reach faster the next time fate turned cruel. Reporters kept trying to get interviews. Tabloids spun stories about the woman who rose from her grave, but I stayed quiet. My silence became my peace. Daniel tried reaching out once. A letter, pathetic and full of excuses. "I made mistakes," he wrote. "Maybe we can talk." I didn't reply. Some ghosts aren't worth resurrecting. Melissa filed for divorce soon after. She had gotten what she wanted from him anyway. As for the lawyer, he lost his license. Poetic justice, really. Months later, I moved to a quiet seaside town, far from the noise of money and betrayal. I bought a small cottage overlooking the water. Every morning, I'd watch the sunrise and feel the salt wind on my face, alive, truly alive this time. The crash had broken my bones, but it also broke the illusions I'd once lived under. It stripped away greed, vanity, and false love, leaving me with something real, clarity. I learned that survival isn't just about breathing, it's about letting go of what kills your spirit. Now, when I look back, I don't see a tragedy. I see a rebirth. I may have lost years, trust, and people I thought loved me, but I found something far greater. Peace, purpose, myself. The narrator inside me whispers it every time the waves crash against the shore. The crash broke my bones, but it fixed my vision. I finally saw who truly loved me. Money can attract love, but only tragedy reveals truth. That's something I learned the hardest way possible. When I think back on everything, the inheritance, the crash, the lies, the betrayal, I realize none of it was about the money at all. It was about people, about how greed can turn love into business, and how death, even the illusion of it, shows who truly mourns you and who just counts what you left behind. I used to think wealth could fix everything, broken hearts, broken trust, broken dreams. But the moment my plane went down, none of that mattered. Not the mansion, not the jewelry, not the millions sitting quietly in my bank account. In that burning sky, all I wished for was another breath, another sunrise, another chance to tell the truth. And when fate gave me that second chance, I didn't waste it. Coming back wasn't easy. I faced betrayal from the very people who once swore they loved me. I saw greed dressed as grief. But I also found strength in myself, a strength my uncle must have seen long before I did. He once told me, life will test your soul before it blesses it. And now I understand. The crash wasn't a curse. It was my test. It stripped away everything fake and left me standing with only what was real, my will to live, to rebuild, and to love again, but wisely this time. So when people ask me if I'd change anything, I tell them no. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to see what's worth keeping. I lost my fortune, my marriage, even my identity for a time, but I found peace. I found purpose. I found out that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. But that doesn't mean I let everyone back in. Some doors are meant to stay closed. And now I want to ask you, if you were given a second chance at life, would you forgive those who betrayed you? Or would you walk away forever like I did? Would you use your pain to build walls or bridges? Think about it, because the truth is, tragedy doesn't destroy you, it defines you. If my story made you feel something, even for a moment, tell me in the comments below. I'd love to know what you would do. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories like this. Stories about survival, love, betrayal, and the strength that rises from the ashes. Because sometimes, the best stories are the ones born from pain.